You were alive before your first memory. You already had a body, a room, smells, voices around you, hands that picked you up, fed you, rocked you, calmed you, and called you by name. You looked at faces. You felt cold and warmth. You were startled by loud sounds. You laughed before you had words. You fell asleep and woke up inside a world that was already shaping you every day. But almost all of it vanished. Not just blurred, not hidden somewhere deep, like an old file in an old folder. It fell out of access. The beginning of your life is a place where you truly lived, but where the adult you can almost never return. So why does the brain erase its own beginning? You existed long before you learned how to tell the story. Most adults cannot remember events from the first 2 or 3 years of life, and memories before about age 7 are often fragmented, isolated, and unreliable. This is called infantile amnesia, or childhood amnesia. The problem is not that the baby felt nothing, learned nothing, or reacted to nothing. By the late 20th century, studies had already shown that young children can remember events for months, and sometimes keep experience longer than psychologists once believed. So the early brain is not empty. It is not switched off. It is already active enough for learning to change a child's behavior and expectations. The paradox is this: a trace seems to form, but later, adult consciousness can barely reach it. A baby's brain is not a smaller, simpler copy of an adult brain. It is a system rebuilding itself while it works, like a city where new roads are being built every day, while old ones are being removed at the same time. This is not a broken machine. It is a different mode of operation, a different architecture of priorities, a different stage of construction. The hippocampus, a structure critical for episodic memory, matures gradually. Its circuits and regions do not come online all at once. Memory exists during this period, but its mechanics are not yet the same as the adult way of remembering a personal life. A baby may recognize a familiar face, expect a familiar order of actions, reach toward a certain person, fear a certain situation, or calm down when hearing a familiar voice. But none of that means that 20 years later, the child will be able to say, "This is what happened to me that day." The early brain absorbs the world beautifully, but it does not yet build an adult archive of life. It collects useful rules faster than it collects a personal chronology. The second major reason is language. We often imagine memory as an inner video stored somewhere in the mind, but human autobiographical memory is deeply connected to our ability to name an event, describe it, separate it from other events, and weave it into a story. The first years of life are different. Experience already exists, but words for that experience are still missing. Classic experiments by Gabrielle Simcock and Harlene Hayne showed this clearly. Children can retain a memory of an event that happened before a major leap in language, but later, they cannot fully translate that pre-verbal experience into their newer language. It is as if the event is in the archive, but the file was saved in a format that the older version of you can no longer open without errors, losses, and strange gaps. That is why first memories are so often fragmentary. The color of a blanket, a frightening sound, light in a hallway, the taste of medicine, the feeling of falling. But not a full story with a beginning and an end. Language does not create memory from nothing, but it helps memory become accessible, stable, repeatable, and truly narrative. There is a third layer, the sense of self. Autobiographical memory is not just a database where pictures of the past are stored. It is a system where an event is attached to me. This happened to me at this moment in my life, in this place, and it matters to who I am. But in a very young child, that me is still being built. It is still gathering itself, still learning how to stay together. In simple terms, to have a life story, you first need someone who can carry that story, recognize it, and connect it to the self. A baby is not nobody. A baby experiences the world intensely, sometimes even more intensely than an adult, because it cannot yet filter the world in the same way. But the adult form of the self, the one that later sorts the past into biography, is not yet standing on its own. A gap opens between early experience and the later narrator. Early life is deeply real in the moment and strangely distant afterward. There is an even more radical idea. The early brain does not only underspeak or undershape memories, it may literally rebuild itself so quickly that old traces become fragile. One major neurobiological candidate is high neurogenesis in the hippocampus during early life, the active birth of new neurons that enter a network still organizing itself. For memory, this is like renovation inside a house where the furniture keeps moving before you have even learned the room. In childhood, the memory system may not simply store traces. It may also be actively reshaping its own circuits, as if rewriting a draft again and again. Most likely, several forces work together: hippocampal development, language, the growing self, social conversations about the past, rapid forgetting, and network reorganization. So the brain is not broken. It is not failing us. During this period, it is solving a different problem, not preserving a perfect diary of the first years, but becoming a system that can remember, learn, and adapt inside an increasingly complex world. The fact that you cannot tell the story does not mean the early experience disappeared without a trace. Part of early memory lives not as a story, but as a pattern, a reaction, an expectation, a bodily feeling, an emotional shape. The early years can influence attachment, fear, safety, and the way we learn, even without a clear memory scene that can be retold in words. So the most honest answer is this: you do not remember yourself as a baby, not because you were not there, but because a different version of the memory system was there. It was already learning, already absorbing the world, already building expectations. But it did not yet know how to package experience into the autobiographical forms that an adult brain can easily open, repeat, and call its own many years later. And that is why our first years form us more than they speak through us. There is another reason this subject is so haunting. It strikes at our intuition about the continuity of the self. We want to believe that we are one unbroken line from birth to today, one continuous voice, one narrator inside. But the truth is stranger. The first years do not vanish completely, and still, they do not belong to us in the usual way. They are our years without our access, our beginning without permission to enter. Memory does not simply replay the past. Each time, it partly constructs it again, filling the gaps with a story that feels plausible. That is why a first memory can look more like a reconstruction than a recording. The beginning of your life is not stored somewhere in a vault as a lost video recording that one day you can press play and watch again. It is dissolved into how you calm down, whom you fear, what you trust, how you learn to love, to wait, to recover after pain, and to look toward tomorrow without words. You cannot return to that room as a viewer, but you still carry its traces inside you. So maybe the brain did not delete your childhood. Maybe it transformed it into a foundation, quiet, dark, invisible. But without it, the rest of you would not stand. The entrance is closed, but the building stands on it. It is not an archive you can open. It is the ground you are standing on.